Well, good evening, this is Houndog Steve coming to you on the 18th of December. And, I was listening to the program on CBC Radio yesterday, Sunday, called Cross Country Checkup. And they were talking about fake news and where you get your news from, where you get trusted news sources. And there were some fascinating comments. It was actually very interesting how many people thought that a lot of the mainstream media really weren't being quite as truthful as they should be about the news, and that the CBC has a left-leaning bias that leads to virtually the complete exclusion of anything conservative. So, of course, as this has been on my mind for quite a while, I started doing a little bit of research. And I came up with an article recently by Margaret Wente out of the Globe and Mail, and she is talking about, is it okay to fake the news if it's for a good reason? And this is about the polar bear story. I'm sure you heard of it. It went viral, this poor starving polar bear, and they tried to link that to global warming and the fact that there was land instead of ice. But of course, as everyone knows, the ice does disappear in the tundra in the summertime, and it came out that the bear might have just been sick or just aged. Bears do get old and die, and of course it's not very pretty because they don't have OHIP or any of those medical supports that we are used to in our lives. So let me now switch over to some of the stories that I put together to try and link together this story of the Globe and Mail when I read the editorial today in the Globe and Mail, and I'm going to give you some real hard examples of how the mainstream media is lying by omission and commission. So let's take a little look, shall we? Okay, so here she is, Margaret Wente, Globe and Mail. This was December the 12th. The starving polar bear raises a question. Is fake news okay for a good cause? So it talks about, all of our team was in tears, team member Christina Mittermeier told CBC as it happens, when we hear from scientists that in the next 100 to 150 years we're going to lose polar bears. We want the world to see what the starvation of a majestic animal looks like. Only later, when pressed, did she admit that it was impossible to tell why the animal was dying. That shocking video is a classic example of fake news, a phenomenon that's depressingly common in the environmental business, even at a leading brand such as National Geographic. So what if it isn't true? If it's all for a good cause, then the facts don't matter. The point is, it was starving, explained Mrs. Mittermeier. As we lose the ice in the Arctic, polar bears will starve. Well, maybe, but even concerned scientists agree that one emaciated bear is not evidence of climate change. It's far more likely that it is a starving due to health issues, tweeted Arctic wildlife biologist Jeff Higdon. As apex predators, polar bears live long enough to get old and sick, just as people do. Starving polar bears are the stuff of periodic propaganda shots. In 2015, another polar bear in Norway became the temporary poster animal for global warming. So, and of course, the trouble with wild exaggerations and scare stories are not just bad for science, they're bad for all environmentalists who want to win over the goodwill of the public. So here we have this heartbreaking picture of a polar bear, obviously terribly emaciated and struggling to get to its feet. It's pitiful to watch. It's no fun watching anything that is in this state of health and dying. Okay, so let's move on. This is the Globe editorial, the war on truth and on freedom of the press. And he talks about, when police invited a pair of Reuters correspondents in Myanmar for a chat last week, the two men accepted. Even in repressive regimes, journalism requires doing interviews with officialdom. But when Wei Lon and Kaior So-u arrived, they were arrested presumably over stories they wrote about Myanmar's murderous crackdown on the Rohingya Muslim minority in Rakhine State. They now face 14 years in jail. And a story about Turkey The picture at home here, of course, is sunnier. There are occasional excesses, like officials at the Ontario Regional Council meeting recently seized the reporters' materials, but this year also saw the adoption of a new federal law protecting journalists' anonymous sites. Such measures take on a new importance in a media environment where some seek to purposely and aggressively diminish the value of the people's right to know. We're thinking here of President Donald Trump and the propagandists who abet him, with their corrosive tick of braying fake news at every turn. Mr. Trump's words and his baseless attacks on journalistic institutions are mimicked by autocrats everywhere. This is not a coincidence. The Russo-American journalist Masha Gessen wrote a year ago that for people like Mr. Trump, lying is the message. The aim, she said, is to assert power over truth itself. The truth is something that is uncovered, not owned. What else is journalism but the relentless search for it? The increasing arrests of reporters reminds us that press freedoms are fragile. We allow them to erode at our collective peril. Okay, so I am going to take you back to this story. Trump formally recognizes Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Okay, this is the Globe and Mail again, and this was on December the 5th. US President Donald Trump will formally recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital city and kickstart the process of moving the US Embassy there, reversing decades of American policy, defying the United Nations and further complicating the Middle East process. Mr. Trump will make the announcement at 1 p.m. Wednesday, said three administration officials speaking on condition of anonymity. The president gave an advance heads up Tuesday to the leaders of the Palestinian Authority, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia and Israel. Okay, so this is the interesting part. Reversing decades of American policy and defying the United Nations. Okay, so let's go to, and what is this? Senate unanimously passes bill marking 50 years since Jerusalem reunification. With a vote of 90-0, lawmakers of Capitol Hill's upper chambers say Jerusalem should remain the undivided capital of Israel. And this was on June the 6th, 2017 at 1:59 p.m. So that's just this year. Co-sponsored by 17 senators, including Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican, and Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat. The text calls on the legislative body to recognize the half-a-century landmark since Israel's captured the eastern part of the city during the 1967 Six-Day War. Jerusalem should remain the undivided capital of Israel, in which the rights of every ethnic and religious groups are protected. The resolution states, adding that there has been continuous Jewish presence in Jerusalem for 3 millennia. It also states that Jerusalem is a holy city and the home for people of the Jewish, Muslim and Christian faiths. How very interesting. But surely there would be no other president that would have wanted Jerusalem to be the undivided capital of Israel, would there now? Not like this.
Jerusalem is still the capital of Israel and must remain an undivided city accessible to all.
Or this president.
As soon as I take office, I will begin the process of moving the United States ambassador to the city of Israel as chosen as its capital.
Or this president.
I continue to say that Jerusalem will be the capital of Israel, and I have said that before, and I will say it again.
And Jerusalem will remain the capital of Israel.
No one else is saying that Jerusalem should be the undivided capital of Israel. Only Trump, undoing decades of US foreign policy. So what do I hear from the mainstream media everywhere on these other three presidents who spoke about unifying Jerusalem and moving the embassy to Jerusalem? That's right. Absolutely nothing. So why is this important? Well, when you lie, you pathologize your mind. Okay? When you lie, you pull us off base. A story like this can so easily be fact-checked, back-checked, or whatever you want. Just completely discredits the mainstream media. And the way we got to where we are is literally by honing in on the truth, on the final answer. We did things, we made mistakes, we refined, we changed, we altered, we improved, and until we got to the level of society that we have right now. Okay, we didn't get here by lying to ourselves. We didn't get here by pretending that things weren't true. And at one time, papers used to just report the news and let us decide. Well, maybe they had some influence and some desire to, make up our minds for us. Maybe that has always been there. In fact, I'm sure it has. But right now, they are undermining their own legitimacy and in turn driving people onto the computer, onto YouTube, to listen to alternate sources of information. Okay, this happened down in California this year when they had the floods at the Oroville Dam. Okay, it was overflowing, part of the spillway had broken away, there was a potential chance of flooding, and the government said nothing. They said, stay put, it'll be fine, it's all under control, we'll take care of it. Okay, well, the dam did partially break way, there were people who were going to get flooded out, and they were given 12 hours notice by the government through the mainstream media. So now you have hundreds of thousands of people who basically stopped trusting the mainstream media and the government in the area, and they're starting to go to their neighbors who put up YouTube videos, okay, because they actually were living close to the dam, in that proximity, they could see what was happening. And so that was a way that those people learned to trust alt media over mainstream media, because alt media usually doesn't have anything to gain, it has no agenda, it's not being driven by finances or by clickbait or to try and get you to view through sensationalism. I mean, I know that does go on, and there's no doubt about it. There are lots of videos that do that as well. But there are many, many, many more videos like mine who are simply seeking the truth and who refuse to lie to themselves for the sake of going along with the program. There is only one truth, and that is the truth. And as the reporter said in the editorial from the Globe and Mail, that's the only thing that reporters should be looking to seek out and to tell the story of, is the true story. And so I think we've clearly proven that the Globe and Mail is more than ready to jump on the bandwagon, more than ready to debase itself, tell lies, and mislead the public by leaving out critical pieces of information and structurally changing other pieces of information. Like I'm sure that what they're going to say is about the undoing of decades of US policy is that every president has promised to hold Jerusalem in its entirety as the capital of Israel and to move their embassy to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv, but none of them have followed through. And so Trump is actually breaking step with that because he's actually going to follow through. And I guess you could say that's a legitimate reason. But when you read that article about Trump stepping away from decades of US foreign policy, your first impression is that this guy is really out in left field. What an idiot he is to be, breaking every tradition that he possibly can, and mocking and snubbing every other president that's gone before him. And of course that's just not true. So this is a formal request from a YouTuber who likes to report the news to other reporters out there: stick to the truth. The truth is interesting in and of itself, just as we have now exposed the Globe and Mail as faking the news. Isn't that an interesting story? And it's the truth, because we have all the proof now right in front of our eyes. Okay, so beware, do your own checking. Go and back check everything. That's one thing that you have to do now with all the media that you gather your information from. You have to look in the show notes. You have to open that show more box to see if there are any links to the information they're talking about. And you find that the good reporters, they do link their show notes. Okay, where you can go and check every story that they are talking about. And of course I do the same thing, because you can see where I'm getting my information from and bringing it to your attention. So we can stick to the truth. The truth doesn't mean boring news, it's still interesting, and of course it's the way we present it. So think about that and basically conduct yourself accordingly. There is an old tenet in Roman law that says, let he who would be fooled be fooled. In other words, if you get fooled, it's because you actually wanted to get fooled. It's because you didn't do the checking, you didn't do the research or the due diligence, and you got fooled by somebody who wanted to fool you, and you let it all happen. So anyway, I hope you found this interesting. This is Hound Dog Steve signing off, and please like and subscribe below and click on that little bell so you get all of the updates of my new videos up and coming. And please, you have a wonderful week. We've just had a whole bunch of snow come down, so I'm sure it's going to be a pretty interesting day tomorrow too. Okay, you take care, have a great week, we'll talk to you soon. See ya.